Chapter 36. Babaji's Interest in the West. Master, did you ever meet Babaji? It was a calm summer night in Serampore. The large stars in the tropics gleamed over our heads as I sat by Sri Yukteswar's side, on the second-story balcony of the hermitage. Yes, Master smiled at my direct question, his eyes lit with reverence. 3 times I have been blessed by the sight of the deathless Guru. Our first meeting was in Allahabad at the Kumbh Mela. The religious fairs held in India since time immemorial are known as Kumbh Melas. They have kept spiritual goals in constant sight of the multitude. Devout Hindus gather by the millions every 6 years to meet thousands of sadhus, yogis, swamis, and ascetics of all kinds. Many are hermits who never leave their secluded haunts except to attend the melas and bestow their blessings on worldly men and women. I was not a swami at the time I met Babaji, Sri Yukteswar went on, but I had already received Kriya initiation from Larry Masha. He encouraged me to attend the mela, which was convening in January 1894 at Allahabad. It was my first experience of a kumbh. I felt slightly dazed by the clamor and surge of the crowd. In my searching gazes around, I saw no illumined face of a master. Passing a bridge on the bank of the Ganges, I noticed an acquaintance standing nearby, his begging bowl extended. Oh, this fair is nothing but a chaos of noise and beggars, I thought in disillusionment. I wondered if Western scientists, patiently enlarging the realm of knowledge for the practical good of mankind, are not more pleasing to God than these idlers who profess the religion but concentrate on alms. My smoldering reflections on social reform were interpreted by the voice of a tall sannyasi who halted before me. "Sir," he said, "a saint is calling you." "Who is he?" "Come and see for yourself." Hesitantly following this laconic advice, I soon found myself near a tree whose branches were sheltering a guru with an attractive group of disciples. The master, a bright, unusual figure with sparkling dark eyes, rose at my approach and embraced me. "Welcome, Swamiji," he said affectionately. "Sir," I replied emphatically, "I am not a Swami." Those of whom I divinely directed to bestow the title of Swami never cast it off. The saint addressed me simply, but deep conviction of truth rang in his words. I was engulfed in an instant wave of spiritual blessing. Smiling at my sudden elevation into the ancient monastic order, I bowed at the feet of the obviously great and angelic being in human form, who had thus honored me. Babaji, for it was indeed he, motioned me to sit near him under the tree. He was strong and young, and looked like Larry Masha, yet the resemblance did not strike me, even though I had often heard of the extraordinary similarities in the appearance of the two masters. Babaji possesses a power by which he can prevent any specific thought from arising in a person's mind. Evidently the great Guru wished me to be perfectly natural in his presence, not overawed by knowledge of his identity. "What do you think of the Kumbh Mela?" "I was greatly disappointed, sir," I said hastily. "Up until the time I met you, somehow saints in this commotion don't seem to belong together." "Child," the master said, though apparently I was nearly twice his own age, "for the faults of the many, judge not the whole. Everything on earth is a mixture of character, like a mingling of sand and sugar. Be like the wise ant, which seizes only the sugar, and leaves the sand untouched. Though many sadhus here still wander in delusion, yet the mela is blessed by a few men of God realization." In view of my own meeting with this exalted master, I quickly agreed with his observation. "Sir," I commented, "I have been thinking of the scientific men of the West, greater by far in intelligence than most people congregated here, living in distant Europe and America, professing different creeds and ignorant of the real values of such mela as the present one. They are the men who could benefit greatly by meeting with India's masters. But although high in intellectual attainment, many Westerners are wedded to rank materialism. Others, famous in science and philosophy, do not recognize the essential unity in religion. Their creeds serve as insurmountable barriers that threaten to separate them from us forever. I saw that you are interested in the West as far as the East." Babaji's face beamed with approval. "I felt the pangs of your heart. broad enough for all men, whether Oriental or Occidental. That is why I summoned you here. East and West must establish a golden middle ground of activity and spirituality combined, he continued. India has much to learn from the West in material development. In return, India can teach the universal method by which the West will be able to pass its religious beliefs on the unshakable foundation of yogic science. You, Swamiji, have a part to play in the coming harmonious exchange between Orient and Occident. Some years hence I shall send you a disciple whom you can train for yoga dissemination in the West. The vibrations there of many spiritually seeking souls come flood-like to me. I perceive potential saints in America and Europe, waiting to be awakened. At this point in the story, Sri Yukteswar turned his gaze fully at mine. My son, he said, smiling in the moonlight, you are the disciple that years ago Babaji promised to send me. I was happy to learn that Babaji had directed my steps to Sri Yukteswar, yet it was hard for me to visualize myself in the remote West, away from my beloved Guru and the simple hermitage pace. Babaji then spoke of the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Yukteswar went on. To my astonishment, he indicated by a few words of praise that he was aware of the fact that I had written interpretation on various Gita chapters. At my request, Swamiji, please undertake another task. The great master said, will you not write a book on the underlying basic unity between the Christian and Hindu scriptures? Show by parallel references that the inspired sons of God have spoken the same truth, now obscured by men's sectarian differences. Maharaj, I answered diffidently, what a command! Shall I be able to fulfill it? Babaji laughed softly. My son, why do you doubt? He said reassuredly. Indeed, whose work is all of this, and who is the doer of all actions? Whatever the Lord has made me say is bound to materialize as truth. I deemed myself empowered by the blessing of the saint, and agreed to write the book. Feeling reluctantly that the parting hour had arrived, I rose from my leaf seat. Do you know Lahiri? The master inquired. He is a great soul, isn't he? Tell him of our meeting. He then gave me a message for Larry Masha. After I had bowed humbly in farewell, the saint smiled benignly. When your book is finished, I shall pay you a visit, he promised. Goodbye for the present. I left Allahabad the following day and trained for Benares. Reaching my guru's home, I poured out the story of the wonderful saint at the Kumbh Mela. Oh, didn't you recognize him? Larry Masha's eyes were dancing with laughter. I see you couldn't, for he prevented you. He is my incomparable guru, the celestial Babaji. Babaji, I repeated awestruck. The Yogi Christ Babaji? The invisible, visible Savior Babaji. Oh, if I could just recall the past and be once more in his presence, to show my devotion at his lotus feet. Never mind, Larry Masha said consolingly. He has promised to see you again. Guru Deva, the Divine Master, asked me to give you a message. Tell Lahari, he said, that the stored-up power for his life now runs low. It is nearly finished. At my utterance of these enigmatic words, Larry Masha's figure trembled as though touched by a lightning current. In an instant everything about him fell silent. His smiling countenance turned incredibly stern, like a wooden statue, somber and immovable in its seat. His body became colorless. I was alarmed and bewildered. Never in my life had I seen his joyous soul manifest such awful gravity. The other disciples present stared apprehensively. 3 hours passed in utter silence. Then Larry Masha resumed his natural cheerful demeanor and spoke affectionately to each of his chelas. Everyone sighed in relief. I realized by my master's reaction that Babaji's message had been an unmistakable signal by which Larry Masha understood that his body would soon be untenanted. His awesome silence proved that my guru had instantly controlled his being, cut his last cord of attachment to the material world, and fled to this ever-living identity and spirit. Babaji's remark had been his way of saying, I shall ever be with you. Though Babaji and Larry Masha were omniscient, and had no need of communicating with each other through me or any other intermediary, the great ones often condescend to play a part in the human drama. Occasionally they transmit their prophecies through messengers in an ordinary way, that the final fulfillment of their words may infuse greater divine faith in a wide circle of men who later learn the story. I soon left Benares and set to work in Serampore on the scriptural writings requested by Babaji. Sri Yukteswar commented, "No sooner had I begun my task, I was able to compose a poem dedicated to the deathless Guru. The melodious lines flowed effortlessly from my pen, though never before had I attempted Sanskrit poetry. In the quiet of night I busied myself over the comparison of the Bible and the scriptures of Sanatana Dharma. Quoting the words of the blessed Lord Jesus, I showed that his teachings were in essence one with the revelations of the Vedas. To my relief, my book was finished in a short time. I realized that the speedy blessing was due to the grace of my Param Guru Maharaj. The chapters first appeared in the Sadhu Ishtamban journal. Later they were privately printed as a book by one of my Kidiapur disciples. The morning after I had concluded my literary efforts, Master continued, I went to the Rai Ghat here to bathe in the Ganges. The Ghat was deserted. I stood still for a while, enjoying the sunny peace. After a dip in the sparkling waters, I started for home. The only sound in the silence was that of my Ganges-drenched cloth, swish-swashing with every step. As I passed beyond the sight of the large banyan tree near the river bank, a strong impulse urged me to look back. There, under the shade of the banyan, and surrounded by a few disciples, sat the great Babaji. Greetings, Swamiji, the beautiful voice of the Master rang out to assure me I was not dreaming. I see you have successfully completed your book. As I promised, I am here to thank you. With a fast-beating heart, I prostrated myself fully at his feet. Param Guruji, I said, imploringly, will you and your chelas not honor my nearby home with your presence? The Supreme Guru smiled and inclined. No, child, he said, we are people who like the shelter of trees. This spot is quite comfortable. Please tarry a while, Master. I gazed entreatingly at him. I shall be back at once with some special sweetmeats. When I returned in a few minutes with a dish of delicacy, lo, the lordly banyan no longer sheltered the celestial troop. I searched all around the ghat, but in my heart I knew the little band had already fled on etheric wings. I was deeply hurt. Even if we meet again, I would not care to talk to him, I assured myself. He was unkind to leave me so suddenly. This was a wrath of love, of course, and nothing more. A few months later I visited Larry Mash in Benares. As I entered his little parlor, my guru smiled in greeting. Welcome, Yukteswar, he said. Did you just meet Babaji at the threshold of my room? Why, no, I answered in surprise. Come here. Larry Masha touched me gently on the forehead. At once I beheld near the door the form of Babaji, blooming like a perfect lotus. I remembered my old hurt and did not bow. Larry Masha looked at me in astonishment. The divine Guru gazed at me with fathomless eyes. You are annoyed with me. Sir, why shouldn't I be, he answered. Out of the air you come with your magic group, and into the thin air you vanished. I told you I would see you, but didn't say how long I would remain. Babaji laughed softly. You were full of excitement. I assure you that I was fairly extinguished in the ether by the gust of your restlessness. I was instantly satisfied by this unflattering explanation. I knelt at his feet. The Supreme Guru patted me kindly on the shoulder. Child, you must meditate more, he said. Your gaze is not yet faultless. You could not see me hiding behind the sunlight. With these words in the voice of a celestial fruit, Babaji disappeared into the hidden radiance. That was one of my last visits to Benares to see my guru. Sri Yukteswar concluded. Even as Babaji had foretold at the Kumbh Mela, the householder incarnation of Larry Masha was drawing to a close. During the summer of 1895, his stalwart body developed a small boil on the back. He protested against lancing. He was working out in his own flesh the evil karma of some of his disciples. Finally, a few chelas became very insistent. The master replied cryptically, The body has a fine cause to go. I will be agreeable to whatever you want to do. A short time later, the incomparable Guru gave up his body in Benares. No longer need I seek him out in his little parlor. I find him every day of my life blessed by his omnipresent guidance. Years later, from the lips of Swami Keshavananda, an advanced disciple, I heard many wonderful details about the passing of Larimasha. A few days before my Guru relinquished his body, Keshavananda told me he materialized himself before me as I sat in my hermitage at Hardwar. Come at once to Benares, with the words Larimasha vanished. I entrained immediately for Benares. In my Guru's home I found many disciples assembled. For hours that day the Master expounded the Gita. Then he addressed us simply, I am going home. Sobs of anguish broke out like irresistible torrent. Be comforted, I shall arise again. After this utterance, Larimasha thrice turned his body around in a circle, faced the north in his lotus posture, and gloriously entered the final Mahasamadhi. Larimasha's beautiful body, so dear to the devotees, was cremated with solemn householder rites at Manikaraka Ghat by the old holy Ganges. Keshavananda continued, the following day at 10 o'clock in the morning, while I was still in Benares, my room was suffused with a great light. Lo, before stood me the flesh and blood form of Larimasha. It looked exactly like his old body, except that it appeared younger and more radiant. My divine Guru spoke to me. Keshavananda, he said, it is I. From the disintegrated atoms of my created body I have resurrected a remodeled form. My householder work in the world is done, but I do not leave the earth entirely. Henceforth I shall spend some time with Babaji in the Himalayas, and with Babaji in the cosmos. With a few words of blessing to me, the transcendent Master vanished. Wondrous inspiration filled my heart. I was uplifted in spirit, even as were the disciples of Christ and Kabir when they gazed on the living Gurus after physical death. When I returned to my isolated Hardwar hermitage, Keshavananda went on, I carried with me the sacred ashes of my Guru. I know he has escaped the spatio-temporal cage. The bird of omnipresence is freed. Yet it comforted my heart to enshrine his sacred remains. Another disciple who was blessed by the sight of his resurrected Guru was the saintly Panchanan Bhattacharya, founder of the Calcutta Arya Mission Institution. I visited Panchanan at his Calcutta home and listened with delight to the story of his many years with the Master. In conclusion, he told me the most marvelous event in his life. Here in Calcutta, Panchanan said, at 10 o'clock in the morning, which followed his cremation, Larimasha appeared before me in living glory. Swami Paramahansa, the saint with two bodies, also confided to me the details of his own supernal experience. A few days before Larimasha left his body, Paramahansa told me at the time he visited my Ranchi school. I received a letter from him requesting me to come at once to Benares. I was delayed, however, and could not leave immediately. As I was in the midst of my travel preparations about 10 o'clock in the morning, I was suddenly overwhelmed with joy to see the shining figure of my Guru. Why hurry to Benares? Larimasha said, smiling. You shall find me there no longer. As the import of his words dawned on me, I sobbed broken-heartedly, believing that I was seeing him only in a vision. The Master approached me comfortably. Here, touch my flesh, he said. I am living as always. Do not lament. Am I not with you forever? From the lips of these three great disciples, a story of wondrous truth has emerged. At the morning hour of 10, on the day after the body of Larimasha had been consigned to the flames, the resurrected Master, in a real but transfigured body, appeared before three disciples, each one in a different city. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? End of chapter.